We are talking about community engagement and volunteer coordination today, which is a big part of community-based composting, and being able to activate a consistent volunteer base, consistent community presence, and kind of support our goals for community well-being. So just if anyone wants to chime in and answer this first question, why do we care about community engagement? What's important about it? What is our purpose, goals, outcome?
If you're doing something by yourself, even the medium-sized things, you get tired, and if the community doesn't know what is available to them, and they don't know that they can help, then it's our job to get them involved, with programs, and resources.
Yeah, so the response was it can get really challenging to do all of the work by yourself. And so when everyone is working together, that makes the work much easier. And there's just this fact of kind of social kind of encouragement that happens too. When even if you just have one other person helping you, generally collectively there's more motivation to be productive and get the work done. Any other thoughts about why community engagement is important? Yeah.
Doing the actual behavior is its own education to promote asking questions, sharing, finding out what the assets of the resident is, but understanding a beginning of the vision is best translated through actually working together.
Mm. So I think the first part you said was kind of about relationship building and getting to know, like, what's of interest and important to the community members. Is that right?
Yes, and what their assets are.
And what their assets and skills and resources and contributions might be. And the second part I think you said was when we have the community together, allows to kind of bring forth the vision kind of collectively.
We're going to have a lot of challenges in this journey. I guess if we are alone, just two people, it's more easier for the people on the top level, let's say government officials or people who want to commercialize these things. It's easier for them just to divide and rule us. If we are together like a community, it will be much stronger, and it's not easy for those people to penetrate, divide and rule. So I think that's was most important part of having community. And by doing this with the community, we are not saying that, hey, we are providing something, delicious meal or something that's very expensive. No. Initially, we are pointing out a problem in that community and saying, this is a problem here, and we are trying to resolve it. You don't get to say, you cannot do this. No, this is a problem and we are solving it. So you better be behind us. If not, with you or without you, we are going to do it. You want to be with us or not, that's up to you. But we are doing it. So that's what community engagement should be, and that's what most important.
Great. I really appreciate you emphasizing kind of the organizing power, kind of political power that can be built through community engagement. A couple other thoughts?
I can hold that if you like. Hey, what's up, y'all? My name's Ro. I'm seeing some new faces in the room. I accept all pronouns. It's nice to share space with new folks today. I just want to uplift what everybody's been saying, and also to the point that Prema just made. There's an African proverb that when it translates to English says, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." And also, validate, what the end of what she was saying of this train's already moving. You can get on or you could stay at the platform, but we're going to go, and we could hope that you can bring us with you. But also leading with compassion as well, and understanding that people are, these conditions that we live in are socially manufactured, and we all have different access to different spaces, and just meeting folks where they're at as well, and understanding that the folks in our communities, our neighbors, they're the ones that are guiding us. They're the ones that have these lived experiences. They already know what the heck is going down. They live it every day. We live it every day. And so it's taking that, like blunt approach, and coupling with like compassion and understanding, and knowing that, we're gonna meet each other in the light of the revolution at the end of the day and be together. But yeah.
All right, thank you guys for sharing your thoughts and ideas. Really wonderful insights. So some of you added some stuff that I hadn't thought about, like organizing power. I didn't include that in my slide, but it's a great point. So yeah, we want to work together to kind of bring about a shared vision into reality and make the work more enjoyable and less kind of difficult for ourselves. And we also want to be supporting kind of community well-being. So creating space for members of the community to be able to engage in green space, connect with nature, connect with each other, and kind of relearn cycles and processes of nature and land stewardship. And in order to kind of build relationships with volunteers and community members, we really have to build trust. And in order to kind of consistently be collaborating and working together, building trust is a really important kind of foundational aspect to building relationships. And we want to see our neighbors, community members, volunteers as long-term relationships, especially if we're planning to stay rooted in a space for a time to help develop and improve and provide spaces of healing for the community. And so thinking about all of these relationships with volunteers and community members as long-term relationships. And so rooting ourselves in trust and thinking about ways that we can cultivate that trust with new people, especially when we're going into new communities or starting new projects. It can take time to build that trust with new people. And so it's all about cultivating kind of healthy and positive and long-term relationships that eventually, can turn into ongoing partnerships, and also thinking about building partnerships with other kind of organizations in the community or other kind of stakeholders and leaders in the community. Just an overview of what we're going to talk about in this section. We're going to go over some tips for engaging new community members, how we might recruit new volunteers, and do our outreach and promotion. And we're going to go through a full kind of community-led ecological garden design process, integrating community composting. And you guys will get into groups and kind of go through that whole process yourselves with a sample example site called Esperanza that's going to be part of the CalRecycle grant program. And we're also going to talk about, so as part of that process, we're going to talk about organizing and facilitating community meetings. You're at a completely new site. Maybe you don't know the neighbors or people there very well. Maybe you have some volunteer staff on your team. But the community has not been reached out to yet. So what are some ways that you guys would start building that volunteer base, start activating the community there?
Canvassing.
Yep, canvassing is great. Yep, tabling at local events where there's already kind of a community hub happening helps to tap into kind of the existing community that's kind of interested in volunteer events.
Social media.
Yep, social media, definitely.
Your food distribution.
Sorry, what was that?
Distribution.
Oh, food distribution. Oh, that's a great idea.
In the community, send a mail or a flyer saying that we're going to have a harvest festival and let the people to come because it's free fruit for the evening or day, whatever it is. Then we can grab it on.
Yeah, flyering for an event, planning some kind of a special event, and then doing your flyering, outreach, and canvassing to bring people there. Yeah, reaching out to schools, other community centers. Other ideas?
Libraries.
In our neighborhood, we connected to people who were already gardening in their flower beds or have container gardens or even a little herb pot outside their door, they have open ears to what we're talking about.
So identifying people who are already gardening and kind of knocking on their doors, so you already have a sense that they might be interested in this.
This is a very good event when the members in the community there has the involved, invited with free food. And there come, with the flyers and if you has the opportunity for radio or something. But I can work with the members in the community. And when I make one event, free food, many people there come.
Thank you. Yeah, we all love food. Other ideas?
Piggybacking off of the knocking on the doors thing, if you build an outreach division of 20 people, I call it the City Pulse Initiative, and then you can hit blocks. It's just easier to get the knocks.
So you send 20 people out to canvas in the neighborhood. Awesome. That's incredible.
Connecting with local businesses in the area and like putting up flyers in the shops and telling them about it. That way when someone sees it or wants to take a flyer, they can give more information. We've had like a local hardware place at one of our sites. They just like put the flyers and people keep asking them questions. So every time we come back to put more, they're like, hey, people ask me all these questions, tell me more about it. And they become an advocate.
Awesome. Yeah, so connecting with local businesses and putting flyers out there or asking them to support with promotion and outreach is also a great idea.
Yeah, reaching out to non-traditional leaders. That was the old social media in the community, like the people that know everything, and even if they're not connected to your mission, it's good that they are aware that you're in the community and that you're doing what you're doing, because it's a good way to spread the information. So sometimes it's not that non-profit, it's just like a neighbor that knows everything about anyone. So that's always good.
Yeah, so Paula said non-traditional leaders. Maybe they're not, leading an organization or a business, but they're a neighbor and they just happen to know a lot of people. And so they're able to kind of get the word out and bring people together. One of the things, like before you do your outreach, it's good to kind of plan an event, such as a work day or a workshop or just a gathering. And then kind of, if you're starting up a new space and you want to kind of get to know people, you can plan an event, bring food, offer food, host a community meeting just to be like, hey, I want to know what you think about this space, what you're interested in putting in this space, or plan some other types of activities. So you can take that event and go canvassing. It's good to go with like 2 people or so at a time. Maybe you want to have like a survey where you can ask people like what kind of vegetables they want to grow, how comfortable they are with composting their food waste, what skills or interests they might be interested in bringing to the garden. So developing like maybe a short survey and then having a flyer for like an event such as a community meeting or a workshop or a dinner gathering or a lunch gathering, something like that. You knock on their door and say, hey, we're starting this new project. Are you interested in participating? And then oftentimes people are really excited and interested. It does seem like it tends to take them time to actually come to the site and get involved. Generally, once the garden or program is a little bit more built out and established, more people feel kind of comfortable coming and engaging with the space. So it may take time. You may have to, knock on their door several times in order for them to kind of build trust and get to know you. So that's all part of the trust building process. So flyering is also really great. Printing out little quarter-page flyers and handing them out at farmers markets, local businesses, local events where there's already going to be a lot of people attending. It's also a good way to kind of get the word out. Social media obviously is really great. Sometimes if you're trying to, make sure you're reaching out to the local neighbors. So all of these different approaches, you're kind of reaching out to different types of groups of people. So with canvassing, you get to reach out to the immediate neighborhood, generally speaking, if that's generally that's the goal, is to knock on your neighbor's door for where the site is located. With flyering, depending on where you are, like, you get to reach out to other members of the community that may not be in the immediate neighborhood. So they probably are in the same city, or like a neighboring city, but they're maybe not in that immediate neighborhood. But they could be. Social media, you may be drawing in people from further out. And kind of depends on like how active people are in your immediate neighborhood on social media as to whether they'll see your announcement and come through. At the Buena Vista Community Garden in Pomona, we post on social media a lot, and it does reach a lot of the local community members, maybe not the immediate neighbors. That's where canvassing is really helpful to actually reach the immediate neighbors. But social media is great for bringing in volunteers from neighboring communities, neighboring cities as well. And sometimes people come from far away. People will drive from the west side to our events sometimes because they feel, excited to participate. And, we have a unique project. Personal invitations are actually really powerful. So oftentimes, we'll make our social media flyers and I'll just like text them to all the people like on my phone that I think might be interested. And I get pretty good responses that way. If you feel making a personal phone call is also really powerful, to just like personally invite people to your event, to your space, and to talk to them about it. That's also a really powerful way to kind of get people to come. Oftentimes, people really appreciate the personal invitation. So it helps to establish that strong kind of relationship. You can also post or advertise on third-party platforms. Some examples are LA Works or Volunteer Match, local city or community calendars, that there's other local organizations or community centers that have calendars or listservs. You can post there. That's also a great way to reach people. Schools and university hubs and listservs are also a good way to do that. Just wanted to show you guys some flyers. It's like your flyer, the way your flyer looks is not necessarily the end-all be-all of whether people are going to come to your project or not. And part of it is kind of the energy and message that you're sending through your flyers. Mostly you want to draw like people who are interested in your work and who are like-minded or share values and purpose. And those people are going to, so that's the essence of what you want to express. So you'll see this middle flyer at the top. There's a lot of text on there, so it's like kind of hard to see that, especially on social media. But if people are excited about composting, like they may read the whole thing, and that may be really informative and encouraging and inspiring for them as well. I love the Food Cycle Collective flyer because it's like very simple, kind of has a kind of loud kind of statement to it, but it's very simple, and it's just like, come meet us at Sundays at the park for this ride. So depending on the situation, like that one's just kind of a weekly situation. Some of these are specific events, and so maybe you want to have more details about where it's going to be located and where people can find you. I usually like to put in, like for the Eco Farm Workday, like what some of the activities we might be doing that day. You can keep it general if you want to, and sometimes people are drawn to kind of specific activities. Ultimately, it's really about activating a consistent volunteer base is really about relationship building, and the flyer and kind of outreach is kind of a way to draw in people. But it's not necessarily a guarantee, just if you have a fancy flyer, that you're going to have ongoing community or ongoing volunteers. So ultimately, it's about building that relationship. When we started the Buena Vista Community Garden Eco Farm project, we had our first community meeting, and we created like a very kind of text-heavy flyer. But we kind of wanted to express like all of the different, like the kind of complex vision of the space. And so we decided to just write it all out. Some people wanted it to just be like a simple graphic and time and date and address, and that's it. But I don't know, I wanted to kind of add more details about what we'd actually be doing, just to be clear about that. So there's trade-offs to either approach. If you have a more kind of graphic-oriented flyer, that evokes a certain energy. If you have a more text-based flyer, people are going to have to invest a little bit of time to read it. So that, there's trade-offs to both approaches. So when you do your outreach, especially with like canvassing, you want to have a way to record people's contact information. So if they say like, oh, hey, I'm super interested, I'm totally down to help, you want to be able to like call them or text them or email them to invite them to help out when there's an event or an activity. So you could manage your own kind of spreadsheet database, like manually. If you have a survey, you can make it on Google Forms, and that will automatically populate to a spreadsheet. There are phone or text group management apps like WhatsApp or GroupMe, where you can send a bulk text to like 50 people. You can also do email list management. MailChimp is kind of free, but I feel like they introduced some like more paid features. There's also a program called MailerLite for email list, or you can just manually manage your email list. Just like, save it in a document or a spreadsheet and then just manually email everyone when you have an announcement to make. Alenna is going to talk to us about the LA Compost volunteer recruitment system. And then there's some, so they use a program called Volunteer Hub, which is kind of a paid service. Also other volunteer management systems such as Better Impact, Volunteer Mark, and signup.org. So Alenna, do you want to talk about LA Compost volunteer coordination?
Hi everybody, my name is Alenna. I'm the outreach manager for LA Compost. And today I'm sharing some information about the back end coordination of volunteers. I think it's a piece of the puzzle that often gets forgotten for lots of reasons, whether we're super busy, we're all volunteer run ourselves, we're already volunteers. But what I found through working with various nonprofits and volunteer programs is if you put up a little bit of time and energy into the administration process, when it comes time to have that volunteer event where you really need people, it's going to be a lot easier. And I would love to get a read of the room of how many, I think it might be the vast majority of you, but how many already work with volunteers? Cool, awesome. So I'm glad we're speaking the same language. But these are just some, I think, key elements that I found through observing different volunteer programs, but especially our compost managers run volunteer events. And at LA Compost specifically, we have, a vast network with compost managers overseeing different parts of the city. And each compost manager has their own style and sort of flair that they bring to volunteer events. But what I've also seen is volunteers that sign up to do community composting are already sort of gems in and of themselves, because if you're talking about the kind of person that wants to be outside, do a little bit harder work and things like that, they're coming really for an experience. And I've told my team, I've heard from people, they come for an experience and you are also the superstars. They want to learn from you. They want to end their day saying, I had this amazing time working with LA Compost or whatever organization it is, and my life is forever changed. So it sounds like a lot of pressure, but really what I've seen is that with a couple different things worked in throughout the day, you can really provide that experience without even, trying too hard. So some key elements that I've seen be really successful are a welcome and orientation. I'm sure that a lot of you work at really cool sites where there's a lot to see and touch and smell. So just a brief orientation of the site, where you are, a little bit of history, talking about the work that you put in to make the site possible. Volunteers really connect with that. And I think a lot of you also have social justice missions as part of your work as well. So that'd be a great thing to share. Also, this is a time where you can do a quick check-in via whatever system you use, whether it's a sign-in sheet. Those are still great. We use a system called Volunteer Hub, like Lynn mentioned, that offers a way to check in volunteers via the compost manager's cell phone. So I'll be around for the rest of the day if you're curious about that. But I think that there's a system for everyone, and not everyone should have the same system. So if you have any questions about that, I'm here to talk through things. And then, of course, introductions. I would say definitely don't skip saying who you are, because people come and they want to connect with people as well as an organization. So sharing how you got into the work, what you're passionate about, what you do with the organization, and all of that. People really do want to know that. And then, of course, making sure that new volunteers get this experience is really, really key, I think, to getting those returning volunteers. And I think for our organization, our returning volunteers, they arrive and they're like, hey, what's up? Good morning. And then they're already like turning the pile. So I wouldn't say that you need to do this every single time, but it's very key for new folks that are coming in. And then tool safety, I'm sure all of you know about this. You will get, of course, varying levels of comfort working with various tools. And I, can also speak to the fact that before I worked for LA Compost, I had never really used a pitchfork. So my colleagues have been really great in like very gently and kindly saying like, hey, use your knees, don't turn with your back, and like, let's put it down this way and all of that. So, treating volunteers like they may never have done that as well, going over safety and all of that. And then explanation of the activity and roles. I think our team does a really good job of sort of alternating and breaking the day into various components. So some people are turning, others are sifting, others are adding in material and things like that. And really explaining that every piece of that puzzle is important, that we're going to rotate is super key, I think, to avoiding volunteers off to the side, panting and burning out, and making the activity fun. And also the time passes by really quickly when you do that too. I also love hearing from my colleagues that it's not a competition and all roles are important. I think some folks, and I may be speaking for myself here, but it was intimidating at first when you see people turning a pile really quickly and you're like, wait, I can't do that yet. But just saying hey, I've been doing this for 5 years, no worry, no worries, don't worry about how quickly you're doing it and all of that. It's really comforting, especially if it's their first time. And then getting to know each other. I think this is the main reason why people come out and sign up and show up. They want to have fun, they want to learn. So I think just engaging with them and having that sharing back and forth. And my colleagues later on are going to talk about the 3 C's and the getting to know you components and all of that. That's where this comes in. So questions that I think are really common: what brings you here today? How did you hear about this opportunity? Do you compost at home? And then when we were in LA, people are coming from all over. We get a lot of transplants too, because volunteering is a great way to make connections if you're new to a city. So we asked them what's your LA story? And that opens up lots of things. And we're chatting before we even know it. And just reiterating here, there's power in our networks. This is one of the main reasons people choose to volunteer. And I would also say that, every volunteer could present a new connection. And not to say that you should look at it in terms of what can they give us? But I would say it's very common for volunteers to turn into donors. And who's going to turn away that, So just thinking of it that way, just in the back of your head. And every connection is, important in the end, of course. And then finally, the breaking down, I would say, if you have people in this space, and I'm sure lots of you already do this, use them. If you're cleaning your tools, if you're putting them in the shed already, while everyone's there, have them join in on that. There's no reason why you should let all the people that are there to help you leave and have your team be the ones to put everything away. I think working that into the event itself is a great practice. And then conclusion, I think this is a key part to make sure that people, sort of leave with that warm and fuzzy, oh, I really did that. I really did something important, something of value, something impactful. So this is really cheesy, but I came up with this sort of acronym or mnemonic, a FAN. So F is a fact. If you're concluding your event, fact, you sifted 20 pounds of finished compost that will be applied here at the farm. A is an appreciation. Thank you so much for coming out on this Tuesday morning. We really appreciate you and your time and your efforts. And then N, next steps or next time. We're here every Saturday. We'd love to see you again. Please come out next time. You can sign up on our website or just shoot me an email or a text, whatever it may be. I think leaving them with that little seed planted in their head of hey, we're going to see you again. And we want you to come back is a great way to welcome people to become those recurring volunteers, where I would say what we've learned is the one-time volunteers that just show up for that day is awesome, but the real value is people that continue to come back and they're already bought into the mission. When they leave your volunteer event, they go and they tell their colleagues and their friends and their family, and the network just grows from there. So those people are really key and very valuable. So we're always trying to cultivate those relationships. But yeah, that's all I have. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Alenna. So yeah, that was a lot of great insight and tips from Alenna on cultivating relationships with your volunteers. So that's one of the first steps for building out volunteer community, is to think about that appreciation and mutuality to start building that relationship of trust with your volunteers. Some other tips for kind of getting kind of consistent volunteer community is to set regular workday schedules, and it's good to post them publicly. So if you can maintain some consistency in your workday schedules, or having monthly events or workshops or something like that, that really helps community members. Sometimes people are shy and they'll see you and they'll be really wanting to come out to your workdays or events, but they have to see you post about it for 6 months before they'll actually come out. So on your side, don't get discouraged if people aren't coming out immediately after your first or second or third post even. It can just take people time to build up the courage. People have said that it takes some courage to come to check out a new site. So you want to, be understanding about that kind of time. And then there's other people that are more spontaneous. One time I posted on Instagram an hour before we were having our work day, and I was oh, no one's going to show up. And 2 people showed up because of that social media post. I was wow, you guys are amazing. You've just been waiting for us to call you in today. So sometimes that happens, but ultimately it's still best to kind of have that more consistent schedule. So, if you can have a team to kind of rotate hosting those times, that can really help relieve the burden if you're just kind of one person that needs to be there all the time. Again, monthly events are also helpful, having special workshops on specific topics, or gatherings to celebrate the different seasons or harvest. Another thing that's really helpful is to recognize and celebrate volunteers' commitment. So LA Compost has a gratitude party every year to thank all of the people that have supported LA Compost. So that includes volunteers, donors, collaborators, partners, other community members. And so something like that is also very helpful. The farmers market in Pomona that Eleanor helps to run does kind of a volunteer celebration dinner every year or so. So those types of events are very helpful. And yeah, maintaining consistency is also really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the participatory design process, which we've done with Huerta del Valle and Buena Vista Garden. And some of the LA Compost folks have done that in Watts. So this process is coming into a new site, such as a vacant lot, kind of doing your canvassing and outreach to the immediate neighbors and the broader community. And the purpose being to gather their ideas and insight and interest in what they would like to see in the space, what they might like to grow, how they would like to utilize the space, how they would like to connect and interact in the space. So organizing the community meeting, you can choose to have different activities, food, etc. Maybe information. Maybe it could be integrated with a little workshop or something like that. And then taking all of that information that's kind of brainstormed from the community members and integrating it, distilling it and integrating it into a garden design. So basically, you've created a collective garden design based on everyone's input. Just to make some academic references, there's a paper from the Ecological Society of America that really emphasized community engagement. Some of the research on community engagement kind of points out that just because you're trying to engage the community doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually building trust or making improved decision-making processes. So this kind of Ecological Society of America paper talks about wants to define community engagement as inclusive in community engagement, as one that focuses on collaborative and mutually beneficial approaches that actually does build trust and build positive relationships, and that being the foundation for improved decision making about the environment and environmental health. And so inclusion is kind of defined as recognizing, respecting, and integrating all the relevant perspectives with equal consideration and dignity in decision making. Central to inclusion is shared power, shared decision making, and shared responsibility for implementation, management, capacity building, and governance. So the first things that they describe as being important in a new community engagement initiative is to observe and consciously step back from how you understand the problem and what you might want to see the community say. So obviously you probably have your own vision and ideas coming into a space, but when you're listening to the community, it's important to kind of step back and allow them to share whatever it is that they might want to share. So we want to focus on the process design, so the collaborative decision co-creation process, and build relationships and develop partnerships. And so the most important things to do when you're engaging in that inclusive community engagement process are to listen, pay attention to the words and values and ways that people are describing themselves, as well as how they relate to others and the environment. It's helpful to conduct open-ended interviews, ask kind of open-ended questions to see kind of the broader view of what people have to share. Show up as another point. So attending and organizing informal or formal gatherings, such as like the work days or dinner events or community meetings, and show interest in the community. Follow up. So when you've listened to the community, go back and let them know, like, this is what I heard you say, and this is what I tried to create based on that. And so you're showing that you're following through on the process and that you're responsive to their communication. Connecting to the issue. So we're using our active listening skills to cultivate conversation among community members. And kind of reaching towards what is important to the community members in cultivating connection. And lastly, but not least, trust. So there are many ways to build a trusting relationship. So focusing on how to do that, however you can. So these are kind of the 5 elements of inclusive and community engagement defined by this ecology paper. And they're emphasizing this because projects such as like soil remediation or watershed management, affects the people who live in the neighborhood. And so having scientists get better at community engagement helps to make their science better and helps to make the overall decision-making process better. And ultimately, has more positive impacts on the environment. One of the case studies was on community engagement for green infrastructure, where they transformed vacant lots into public green spaces in Kentucky. And so they did an engagement process where they did visioning workshops, and they asked participants to use like Legos to kind of spatially arrange different pieces of the park and what kind of amenities and infrastructure they wanted to see. They had like a brainstorming board for people to share like words and values and feelings of what they would like to see. Then the group came back and was like, hey, we heard you say all these things, so this is the idea that we created from that listening session. And kind of go back and forth in that way, and consistent kind of community dialogue to co-create and collectively refine the design and decision making that's coming out of that. There's another paper in ecology that is really acknowledging the human dimensions of ecology and recognizing that ecology is not just it is an earth science, and humans are part of the earth. And so human social systems, socioeconomic, geopolitical, cultural, identity issues influence how people interact with ecosystems, and so are also inclusive in the ecological science. So expanding the concept and field of ecology to center human components of the systems that we study, so including like economics, psychology, sociology, policy, geography, humanities, as those are integral parts of the human experience and therefore influential to the ecology and the environment around us. And so I like how that kind of points to kind of the inner dimensions of our experience, and how our kind of inner experience has ultimately a direct impact on the environment. And so thinking about our kind of personal development as well as our social systems has essentially direct impacts on the environment. So thinking about what types of social systems actually improve environmental health indicators, I think is kind of a good direction to move towards. So this kind of paper states that inclusion is achieved when individuals with different identities feel valued and welcomed within a setting, and where that sense of belonging is sustained. And so that's also what we're trying to achieve with community engagement, is for people to feel that sense of connection and belonging. So ecology is also a human science, and the kind of writers of the paper wanted to advocate for more kind of community-based participatory research and more diversity, equity, inclusion in the field of ecological research. So I thought that was a great way, perspective to kind of integrate both the social and ecological dimensions of kind of what we're doing with community composting. All right, so now I'm going to hand it off to Elinor, who's going to tell us about their community engagement project in Watts.
All right. Well, it's really a joy to be able to share with you about the community engagement model that we've been developing at LA Compost in conjunction with the Accelerating Resilience Los Angeles project. But before we get started, I really just want to open the floor to make sure we're all on the same page and kind of thinking about what we're talking about, and just when you're doing community engagement, what are really some of your deep goals in doing that? Why are you engaging the community? Empowerment of the community. That's one of the things you're going for. That's why you're reaching out. Why else are folks reaching out?
What's the question?
When you do community engagement, why are you doing that? Why are you trying to engage the community? What's your goal in engaging the community? To promote the sovereignty of the people around you?
Yeah, pretty much to see the resources that's available for us to provide for ourselves. Instead of going out to reach out for resources.
To help people gain access to the resources to provide for themselves instead of having to go elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Evelyn?
Expand the impact, whatever impact that the space is having on engaging outward, to expand the impact. So if they are willing to come in and participate, the impact can be expanded outward.
So as a way of expanding the impact of whatever project is going on in that local spot. Rosalina?
Creating healthier environments or communities. doing community engagement to create healthier environments in communities. We do community engagement to build relationships and bring neighbors together. Sure.
Maybe just to bounce off that so that people don't remain so isolated.
To help reduce isolation of people in general.
To inform community members of resources or opportunities that are available around them.
To inform community members of resources or opportunities that may be around them. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think what? Ooh. To make life more wonderful. Yeah. Oh, more. To centralize resources, kind of like create little nodes, little hubs.
To learn the assets of people and where they might be willing to engage, what their skills are, and when they're even available. It's a way of inclusion.
So learning more about the people around, both for the purpose of engaging them as assets for the initiative and also for letting them know what. Okay. Yeah, so really as a way of getting to know the community and their strengths and kind of elevating those strengths in conjunction with the collaboration. Okay, thank you. I mean, I think the point of this is to really start looking at that community engagement is like very dynamic and it can serve many purposes and there's lots of reasons to do it. So we developed a three-part model for community engagement and the way that we named those three parts was we kind of were toggling back and forth between English and Spanish and then it sort of came to us in Spanish and has a very like cool synchronous name and which is conocer, compartir, co-crear. All with the same letter, all like verbs, very nice. In English it doesn't lost in translation. So English one is very wordy, but like we kind of conceptualized the first part that we would really do as being a phase of getting to know the community, learning about the community that we were trying to engage with, really engaging in deep listening, being active listeners, and facilitating active listening between community members or groups within the community that might not actually know each other or understand each other very well. So to kind of hold space for getting to know one another. And then kind of a second part of the model is a sharing part, and in particular like a knowledge sharing and a dialogue portion. So one of the things that we want to acknowledge within this is that it's true that the knowledge of communities is often overlooked and ignored, and that's why it's really important for us to listen. But it's also true that communities have been deprived of resources, access to tools, educational information. There's been long histories of like disruptions to the flow of information into communities that are in need. And so it's also important to not just be like, it's totally up to you to do whatever you want, because sometimes that's actually really disrespectful, because you might know something that would make it much easier or much more streamlined, and you want to offer that, but you want to offer it from a space that like leads to an equitable engagement of those ideas of all the knowledge. So yes, invite people to share their knowledge that even may be at odds with other knowledge that's been shared. And then move into dialoguing around that of like, oh, well, I heard you say this, but I kind of think this. So like, how can we reconcile this, or how can we make these two ideas work together? Or, you know, I heard you mention this, but I think it might lead to this problem. What do you think about that? And so then you start to get like the complex interaction of all the different ideas speaking to each other, and people learning more about why people are saying something, or and they're sharing knowledge with each other in the process of this. So that's kind of the second phase. And we encourage both of those kind of first two phases to happen before you ever start to really intentionally create anything. So not to ideally, as much as possible, don't come with an idea and ask for feedback on that idea. come with the open ears and the base information that you want to contribute to that dialogue. And then when all of that is on the table for everyone, then you start to create together. And that's the last stage of co-creation, kind of seeking feedback on any iterations before you go into go mode. So that's kind of the basics of the community engagement model. I've been trying to model it as a graphic a lot, and one of the things that comes up is actually the active listening and the knowledge sharing, they're kind of happening simultaneously depending on who you are, right? So there's an active component and a receptive component, and they're happening at the same time. So even though we presented it kind of linearly, we see it as kind of simultaneous in a relational space. Kind of use the model of a helix of bringing it together and weaving as a way of seeing how these parts are interacting with each other. One thing that I would elevate, if you are aware of elements of structural privilege, that's a good indication that you should listen first. If you feel that you're moving into a situation where there's a very real issue, and even especially if you're coming with resources that the community doesn't typically have access to, that is one of the signs that would lean you towards cultivating a willingness to be the one to listen. So that's something that I just want to put forward here. This model in action, our goal was to share with you all a little bit, kind of like case study style, so you could see how this works. We developed this model because we were invited by a funder to do work in a community where we did not currently work, and we had no relationships with the people. And that actually made us really uncomfortable because they were like, hey, go do this there. And we were like, that's not really how we work. How we work is we get to know the community. And on top of this, they were like, and we want you to work with these other 2 organizations that you don't know. And we were like, okay, we're totally open to it. And as it went forward, it turned out one of those organizations had a little bit of a bad reputation. We're like, well, we'll still try. We're going to see for ourselves. We'll build our own relationship and make our own opinion. And the funder had kind of encouraged the executive staff to get together and write this first phase of a proposal that they said would be 3 phases. And so when we got into this first phase, our staff was like, hey, it would have been better if, maybe we could have contributed a little bit more. We were having trouble executing on our values because of conflicts within the partnership. And we really wanted to build community with the community members, and we didn't necessarily see that happening. So, to be honest, I think as far as our own standards, the first phase was not that great. But fortunately, we did have a strong relationship with the funder. We had a strong culture of trust within our own organization, and we had a lot of clarity about the fact that it was a top priority for us to engage the community. And we had the courage to share our truth about what was happening, and how we wanted to stay in integrity with our values. So we actually went to the funder and we basically said, we weren't able to do what we said we were going to do in phase 1 because of X, Y, and Z. And we actually really want to do what we said we were going to do in phase 1. And so we want you to fund us to do it in phase 2. But we actually don't want to work with these other partners. And we want to get to know the community through a deep community engagement process. And we want to do this deep community engagement process. And we laid it out. And fortunately for us, the funder was like, yes, and thank you for being honest with us. We never get that from people. And they actually felt more respected as human beings because of the way that we had presented ourselves. And so that was maybe a little bit unusual, maybe rooted in a little bit of the relationship, maybe rooted in the fact that I took that proposal around to everyone, was like, is this nonviolent? Is it coming on too strong? and within our team, we're like, should we really say this? And finally agreeing amongst ourselves that we really did want to say it. And fortunately for us, it worked out. and they funded the second round, and I'm going to be sharing with you what we did in that second round. So in that second round, we really wanted to like examine what we wanted to co-create with the community. Again, we didn't know anyone in the community, so we wanted to create a sense of trust and community with people who didn't know us and also didn't know each other. We wanted to create with them a sense of shared purpose or vision towards what the funder was putting forward, but with like a high degree of self-determination of the involved people. We wanted to work together on the basis of community agreements that we had all agreed to, and we wanted to prepare in advance for any potential decisions we might make and any potential conflicts that might come up. And in the end, we wanted to make a design with those people for a community resilience hub that would be a real project on the ground that would seek funding in the proposed phase 3 that this funder had put forward. So to prepare for this, we did outreach. We wanted community members at the table. We had originally planned a broad community canvassing effort, which was intended to launch right after COVID shut everything down. And we were seeing nonprofits all over the place just sort of be like, well, we can't do it. And we're like, no, that's not us, you know? And so we were like, okay, how are we going to do this? We started attending community Zoom meetings, making announcements that we were going to have a series of meetings coming up. We directly invited every single contact we had met during the first phase and invited them to move forward with us. We invited people to ask anybody else they knew that they thought might be interested in building a community resilience hub. And we did outdoor pop-ups all around the community at gardens, giving away plants and like knocking on doors around those spaces, kind of like inviting people to come get plants and compost and see if they were interested in joining up for a series of meetings to develop some spaces. We did a lot of planning for our community meetings. I think we spent more time planning our meetings than being in our meetings. So we met as our core team of 3, which are all here. So myself, Paula, and Johnny in the back. And we made 2 series of bilingual community design meetings. In the first series, we did an intro session to kind of let people know what the scope of what we had put forward would be. And then we did 6 sessions on visioning the project, developing shared purpose, and establishing community agreements. After that was done, and some of the things that we developed were community agreements, but also decision-making principles and conflict resolution principles, we then put forward to the community. We have a limited amount of resources. We can do 3 proposals. We want to decide with all of these people, where are these projects going to be? And so we had originally only had 1 session for that, but that was definitely an underestimate of how much time that was going to take. So we made additional sessions to use those agreements about how we would make decisions to actually then make the decision about what sites we would do. And the community ultimately developed 2 community resilience hub proposals with us. And then we did individual sessions with those communities where we did outreach around those sites that were selected again. And we did a second community engagement process around the actual design of the garden, where we delved into like what people wanted to see in the garden, what did they want to build in the garden, what did they want to do in the garden, who did they want to see in the garden, and how that space would be welcoming to them. We kind of went through that through another series of meetings for each location. What these meetings looked like was like an hour and a half to 2 hours on a theme that had been previously announced in the series. So people knew what was coming up. They were in a bilingual kind of language justice format with dual language slides anytime we had slides, and immediately delayed interpretation from Spanish to English or English to Spanish. So participants could speak in whatever language they felt most comfortable in, and we would simultaneously interpret in this like slightly delayed fashion so that everyone could be on the same page. What does this mean? It means your meeting takes twice as long. And also you sometimes have to like create signals and agreements for like kind of asking people to be concise so that you can actually get everyone hearing what's going on. What are the effects in communities like Watts, where you have historically impoverished a city, but with different cultural groups that are not always getting to engage each other, because there may be language barriers between them, or they may live in different parts of the neighborhood or have different things that they come together around in terms of like celebrations and other things. So kind of bridging some gaps in a community engagement process so that everyone could receive the benefits of the kinds of projects that were being put forward. In these meetings, we ask lots of open-ended questions. We participated as facilitators, but as also participants. So at the point of engaging in this project and making a commitment to this project, we viewed ourselves as entering into community with these people who were coming to be part of this project. And even though we were facilitating, kind of playing that role of service towards the community, we also wanted to be able to contribute from our own experiences as just regular human beings. We plan to have all 3 of our staff there for every meeting. This was really important because it allowed us to keep our commitment to the community without overburdening ourselves. So it was true that sometimes not all 3 of us were there, but we were still able to well manage the meeting because we always had 2 people there. So that was very important for working within our capacity. At every meeting, we revisited the information that we had heard in previous meetings to be inclusive of community members who had not been able to make the previous meeting, for people who had been there to offer feedback of like, nah, that's not what I said, you didn't get it right, and for people who had never heard it at all to say, oh, that's interesting, but I feel this way, or I would like it to say this, and to have more dialogue with the community. And finally, as a strategy, we actually recorded the sessions, and we told the community that this was really important for us because we wanted to be fully present in listening to them rather than just try to scramble to like jot down all the notes. And that, especially in the Zoom format, allowed us to be really, really present and build much more connection. Something beautiful that happened in our meetings is like people would laugh in our meetings, and people would want to end the meeting being like, I want to give you a hug, and like joking with each other and smiling. Such a different culture on these meetings than we typically find in other meetings. So that was really beautiful to see. And also, we followed up our work with a lot of engagement between meetings. And I think this is one of the most critical elements to keeping your community engaged is like when you're not meeting, you're still essentially touching base, right? So that's invitations to meetings, reminders. It's saying, hey, we missed you at the last meeting. Like, here's what happened. Like, do you have anything you want to contribute? Figuring out what modality really works for each individual community members. Like, do they need a phone call? Do they need a text? Do they prefer email? And then trying to like connect with the people. And depending on the person's role in the community, they may prefer something different. You know, nonprofit partners maybe like contact me by email, whereas like people with maybe less literacy are like, actually call me. Or I can't join the Zoom meeting, so we're like, well, let's teach you, or let's connect you, or teach you how to connect by phone to get people involved that wouldn't be. We responded when they would say, hey, we need this. We would go find out how to get that thing that they needed right then, and try to be responsive through this longer community engagement process. And when they asked us to come to things, we went. So if they invited us to come present at anywhere, their school, their garden, like we would go. And the last thing we did is we tried to really be generous. We weren't able to meet in person, but we wanted to like provide an acknowledgement of the contribution and the time that community members were giving us. So we did things like utilize some of the funding we have to be responsive to their suggestions. So for example, in one site they said they really wanted more beautiful books for the children in their community. So we just brought them to a work day we had as a way of saying like, hey, take this home with you. We gave them at the end of the series just some food and seeds and other things, just as a way of saying like, hey, thank you. Y'all gave us like 10 days of your time, and like we know that that was maybe taking away from your family and other responsibilities, and we just want to acknowledge that we really appreciate that. I just snapped this excerpt from a meeting so y'all can get the feeling of what was actually happening and not have this be hypothetical in the imagination. This is in the meeting where we developed the community agreements. We've just asked the community members to put their we've asked them how they would like to be treated, and for them to put 3 words into the chat that that express how they're feeling, and we've kind of shared them back with them, and this is them kind of responding.
Eleanor?
I see kindness appeared a lot of times on there. So maybe if folks want to explore a little bit the meaning of kindness for them.
Vemos que se aparece mucho la amabilidad en el chat. Nos gustaría quien haya puesto amabilidad que pudiera compartir qué significa amabilidad para ustedes. Voy a ver, los voy a poner en la luz. I'm going to put you guys on the spot. But who put kindness? A ver, María. Please.
You're muted.
Sí, para mí amabilidad es cuando llega a un lugar y te dan la bienvenida, como ahorita que me metí a la junta, me dijeron, hola María, entonces, buenos días. Eso para mí ya empezamos bien porque me siento confortable con eso, me siento como que es amable la persona y me va a poder, voy a tener una buena conversación con esa persona.
Gracias, María. Thank you, María. María is showing that for her, kindness means, for example, when she arrives to a place and she's well received, like she's just putting the example of this meeting. She just got into this meeting and we say, hi, Maria, how are you? She just feel like relaxed and she feels that she's going to be in a space where she's going to be treated like nicely. And that's going to give the space for her to feel more eager to participate. Gracias, María. Ansu.
Sure, yeah. I mean, this is a really old-fashioned word, but I'm not sure why we lost this old-fashioned term because we really need it, and it's just being well-mannered. It's just standards of politeness means that everybody in our society has a space to be who they are, and we treat everybody with a certain standard. It's just, I don't know how to say it, being polite.
Sí, Ansu está compartiendo que amabilidad puede ser que sea un término como un poquito pasado de moda, pero a grandes rasgos significa ser educado, ¿no? Y para poder respetar las diferencias de que todos somos diferentes, pues tenemos que tener como un estándar de educación y simplemente pues ser educado, ser amable. Y ese es el significado que ella le da a esta palabra. Gracias, Ansu. Thank you, Ansu. Blanca.
Sí, para mí amabilidad es muy importante porque te hace sentir bien, que sean amables contigo. Si, por ejemplo, si estoy haciendo algo y pues necesito hacerlo mejor o algo me está faltando, ese es un ejemplo. Si me lo dice la persona como enojada y siendo ruda de alguna manera o un poquito burlona, no va a ser que lo haga mejor de esa manera porque yo me voy a sentir mal y en vez de hacerlo mejor me voy a poner súper nerviosa y quién sabe si me salga. Pero si me tratan con amabilidad, diciéndome lo que tengo que acomodar y hacer mejor y así, pues obvio, voy a entenderlo con esas palabras. No quiere decir que le pongan florecitas como yo digo a las palabras y así, pero sí que me traten con amabilidad, no cuesta nada, ¿no? Entonces, igual lo estoy trabajando yo en mi persona, porque como dijo la señorita, no sé si pronunció su nombre, Ansu, no, disculpa si no pronuncio bien tu nombre, como lo dijo ella, depende de cómo lo que has pasado tú, es en la manera que tú a veces reaccionas o dices las cosas. Entonces, sí, a veces que yo salgo con cosas y todo esto, es porque he pasado algo y mi manera de pensar no es a veces al igual o igual que la otra persona, es muy diferente y a veces pues me callo ese pensar porque no estoy pensando por lo que haya sido que he pasado, pero sí estoy trabajando en eso de por qué no ser amable con la persona, si en realidad yo a veces me pongo a pensar, yo digo, ok, Blanca, estás conociendo esta persona, no te ha hecho nada.
No sé, eso no significa que puedas terminar, nada más dame chance de interpretar, pero Blanca está compartiendo que sí, justamente la amabilidad es igual para ella ser educado, que a veces cuando estás en una
Hay que traducirlo al inglés.
Oh, sorry. She's just like, thank you. That's my number one favorite mistake in these meetings. But Blanca is just yes. Blanca is just sorry, Moses.
I said I understand. I just can't say anything back. I understand every word.
Oh, okay. Well, but just in summary, she's just saying that for her, kindness is like, as Ansu shared, just education. And sometimes when you make a mistake and someone tries to correct you and they're not being like polite, you might not feel that you want to get better on your mistake. But if someone comes to you and say, hey, you have to do this in a polite way, or this is what you need to do, you might be more open to be like, okay, I can do it because this person is being polite. And she's also sharing that she's working on that too, and because it's not easy. And sometimes she also brought back what Ansu mentioned about perception and how sometimes you react super easy and you forget that people might come from another life experience, and that's why they're reacting. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Sorry, I'm gonna try to do more of this because otherwise I'm just gonna get lost. So, miren estas manitas. Okay. Does someone else want to share maybe another value? ¿Alguien más quiere compartir otro valor? Like maybe Moses, I saw that you, what does it mean to be how do you pronounce that word? Thoughtfulness.
Thoughtfulness.
Yes.
Like, so for example, if I look tired, or if somebody looks tired, if somebody looks tired and I just woke up from a nap, but they look tired, and I'm at the garden and I'm excited because I had lunch and I'm rested, but they didn't eat and they're tired, they might not feel good. So I should think about all of the possibilities before I assume that they feel the same way that I feel when it's time for me to work or interact with them, so that I won't make assumptions and then won't create resentment.
And how do you do that? Do you ask questions or?
No, I'll look and I'll say to myself, okay, this person looks tired. Maybe this person's not a morning person. I shouldn't be so loud and annoying or obnoxious. Or maybe this person likes to talk a lot. Maybe I should listen more and let them talk more. Just being more thoughtful about how I interact with people.
Moses está compartiendo, le pregunté qué significa la palabra. How do you translate thoughtfulness? Thoughtfulness.
Think before you act. Think before you speak.
Sí, como thoughtfulness para él estar
considerado.
Considerado, yes, considerado. Para él un valor muy importante de cómo le gustaría ser tratado es ser considerado, y para él pone el ejemplo de cuando estás en un espacio de trabajo y alguien se ve cansado y tú estás súper activo y emocionado y la otra persona está como, pues no, a la misma energía que tú. En vez de juzgar, puedes decir, a lo mejor esta persona no ha comido, tiene algunas necesidades, y en vez de asumir lo que tú piensas que está pasando, es a lo mejor tomarte un poco de momento, ser considerado y pensar en todas las posibilidades que esta otra persona puede estar atravesando. Y para él esto es un valor importante de cómo ser tratado. Okay, I think we can move to Alenna.
Yeah, I'm open to moving. I just want to say I wrote down all the words and I'm looking at them very carefully, and I just want to offer this little summary that I see kind of different components. So I hear the notion of respect and kindness, which we talked about.
Elinor va a hacer un resumen de las palabras que escuchó muy activamente.
So respect and kindness, and then we didn't talk about them, but honesty, or kind of a sincerity was there many times, as well as patience. And there was many that are like understanding, compassion, non-judgment,
thoughtfulness, mindfulness, empathy, understanding. To me, those actually are kind of falling together in this kind of like sensitive consideration that maybe people use a little bit of different words to describe. But it seems like we actually have kind of a lot of agreement around some of the main words that might guide some of our interactions. So thank you for contributing to that, and I will write them up at the end so we'll be able to see them clearly.
Sí, Elinor encontró mucha similitud entre palabras como honestidad, sinceridad, paciencia, entendimiento, y hubo otras palabras que se usaron de manera diferente, pero que ella describe como ser sensible y considerado, y lo dijeron de muchas maneras, y al final vamos a escribirlas, y esto va a ser como la guía que nos va a ayudar a empezar a crear nuestros propios acuerdos comunitarios.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you both. The next question, it's going to be the same format. We're going to put our name down on the chat and write.
We don't need the name anymore.
Oh, no?
The name appears, yes.
Okay, so it'd be just your 3 responses on the chat. And the question says, when I am at my best, how would I like to be treat others? So the question again is, when I am at my best, how would I like to treat others?
Okay. La actividad es la misma, en 3 palabras. Queremos que nos acompañen en el chat y compartan. Cuando estoy en mi mejor momento, cuando estoy en muy buen estado de ánimo, ¿cómo me gustaría tratar a otros? Cuando estoy en un muy buen momento, ¿cómo me gustaría tratar a otros?
Is this a 3-word format or is this a short sentence?
Okay. 3-word format.
Or if you need a few extra words to express that one thing, feel free.
As a result of these dialogues, they kind of agreed with each other to say, we are a diverse group of people, and each of us brings our own thoughts, lives, experiences, and ways of being. We agree to respect all people by giving each person the space to be who they are moment to moment and to grow to their fullest potential. They also said, how we treat each other has an impact on our work and well-being. We choose to express ourselves with kindness in our words and actions, whether they be as small as sharing a warm greeting or a smile, or as significant as giving without the expectation of receiving, the willingness to laugh about something that hasn't gone well and let it go, or coming to deeply love one another. They said emotions are powerful. When others are experiencing strong emotions, we choose connection by offering sensitivity, consideration, and responsiveness. We take responsibility for our own emotions by checking in with ourselves, taking care of needs like hunger that can make us more reactive, calming down or postponing difficult conversations, and expressing ourselves in ways that are constructive and in service of our personal growth and shared vision. They said, our minds are windows to the world. Our perceptions always have limits. We push these limits by being open to influence from each other and by being mindful, observant, thoughtful, and reflective. Together we said, every day is a new opportunity to get to know each other and be known. We agree to share our authentic selves with openness, honesty, and sincerity. We agree to make space for others to share who they are, their thoughts and feelings, and what's going on for them by listening wholeheartedly, holding back our own assumptions, and being truly receptive to what people have to bring. And they said, growth and change often take time. We endeavor to bring an attitude of patience and understanding to our work and interactions with each other. When we see others struggling, we offer encouragement, compassion, empathy, and empowerment. I want to offer a little bit of space to y'all to hear any other reflections that Johnny or Paula want to share about this work that we did in Watts, about the 3C model of community engagement, and also open the floor for any questions y'all might have about this process.
I actually had a question about the other questions that you included in that particular meeting.
Sure. So we asked 4 questions for developing the community agreements. We asked people how they wanted to be treated. We asked them how they wanted to treat others. And we asked them When someone else is not at their best, how do you want to treat them? And we ask them, when you are not at your best, how do you want to be treated? And it was more or less in that order. And just a reflection on that is like it was a little bit more superficial through the beginning, but you did see even there Blanca that was early being a little bit vulnerable, kind of saying this is something that I'm working on. And when it got into the last two questions, like people were actually getting quite personal in the way that they were expressing themselves. And so sometimes asking these real questions and creating a space of safety to really hear and hold space for people had the effect of a group of people meeting only through Zoom, really developing real relationships of care with each other, giving each other gifts. When they finally met in person, like wanting to embrace and hug the other people and things like this.
Someone on Zoom is asking how many people usually on average came to these meetings.
I would say we had about maybe 12 people at the meeting, anywhere between 8 and 15 in a meeting. And probably overall in the course of the meetings included about 40 different individuals with people coming and going. Some people attending every single meeting just about, and others just coming for one or two.
How do you manage like consistent community engagement on a Zoom setting? I had an event that required different settings, and I was having really spotty like community engagement on Zoom. And like, how do you like, what tips and techniques do you use to help people get involved and like excited about meeting on a virtual space, especially older generations?
I think we'll definitely all speak to this. It's something we talked about a lot and like gave each other feedback, tried different things. We tried to be quite dynamic about how we use the different tools in Zoom. So you heard this one, we first asked them to write in the chat 3 words, and then we were able to use that to call on people, because we found that actually if we just asked a question, no one would say anything. So we needed something to be able to actually like legitimately prompt someone, but that didn't feel like a call out. And so when they had already put something forward in the chat and we were just asking them to say more about that, that was very gentle and well received. We joke with each other. We are really human with each other in terms of talking. I think you saw like Paula being super gracious about like just tripping up a little bit, and I think that like really humanized us. When we would make mistakes, we would just sort of acknowledge it and be our whole selves and not try to be overly professional. And I think the engagement between and before meetings was also really important. I think Paula can speak more to like exactly the kinds of things she did to get people more involved.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Hi, hola, buenas tardes. Paola with LA Compost, and I think it was the consistency that Lynn was mentioning at the beginning of this conversation. We schedule the meetings every day, every week every day of the week at the same time, because these, particularly the mujeres, the women of the community, they were busy. They were jumping from meetings during the COVID, from one meeting to the other, and sometimes they didn't come because I need to attend my neighborhood council meeting. I'm busy with school meetings, with transportation meetings. So we decided to meet for Watts. I think it was Thursdays from 6 to 7:30 sometimes. We went really late. We were competing with a lot of other meetings, but the consistency of the schedule really helped. And of course, I think this is about the justice language interpretation stuff. I'm not an interpreter. I don't have any trainer. This was really challenging. I haven't met our interpreter for this week. Where is she? Yeah, nice to meet you. I mean, I really admire their job. What's your name? Victoria. Sí, o sea, es un trabajo impresionante. Their job that they do is just like, it's so important. For me, it was really difficult. I mean, you guys saw me doing this all the time, and nobody paid attention because they were so into the meeting. So sometimes this is interpretation, right? And I think I have a lot of like encouragement from my team. Like, don't worry, you don't have to. I learned the difference between translation and interpretation. Interpretation is just you are interpreting what you hear, and when it comes to your mind, you got your filter. And that's why the community agreements are so important, because I can hear something, but my baggage, my cultural baggage, my history, my feelings, is going to channelize that information in a way that I see it. So the community agreements help me to interpret that in the way that communities deciding how to communicate between each other. So that was really helpful for me. And I mean, just jokes. We developed like a loteria, bingo, for one of our meetings. So we send this bingo loteria via mail, and they receive it. So every time they came, they put a mark in their bingo, and at the end of the process, if you completed like 5-6 meetings, you get like 6 little presents. And I mean, the energy that Eleanor has and Johnny has to make things happening, we send honey and seeds and books to them at the end of the process. And it's not about giving, because I don't want, and this is something that I'm Mexican, I'm considered in LA a Latinx community. I still don't know how to, I don't know what tag I own or I deserve, but I have heard a lot of people, and mostly like Anglos, saying like, oh, Latinx, they want things in change to come for meetings. And that's kind of like, oh, wait, no. We gravitate around food. We like to share stuff. People are always coming to, we got a mufanda? What's it called? A scarf at the end of the meetings from one of the neighbors. I mean, this is the way we engage. We like to share cositas, little things, right? So it's a good incentive to share love through little objects. So that's always helps. And back in the day before COVID, our raffles were amazing, right? I'm gonna raffle a bag of compost or like seedlings. We try always to give away things that are meaningful to us. No plastic. We're trying to create this culture of like well-being, and people really appreciate that. So I think that helps, and you can do that in a digital setting for sure. Johnny, you want to add something? Come on, Johnny, don't be shy.
No, it's going into the recording.
Hello, everybody. Johnny here with LA Compost. I think the component that really worked for us was being honest and being authentic leaders in this space, not trying to do more than what we wanted to, but really listen to the community. And I agree, it wasn't a space where community felt comfortable. It wasn't another Zoom meeting to show up to listen and just being a person that's bored, because that's something that was expressed during these staff meetings, that it was a unique meeting to compare to the other 5 meetings they just came out of, that they can laugh, they can contribute to the conversation. And, you know, most of the meetings ended with people wanting to share laughter, wanting to share recipes, they're asking for plans, they're asking for what they needed, and we listened and we offered that back to them. And I think that's the component that really worked for us, is being good listeners and really presenting what they requested the following meeting. And working with it in between those meetings with Paula, I agree, she did beautiful work where she's built relationship with these community members that will reach out to her just to check in with her, say Happy Christmas, for holidays, you know. And I've had community members that showed up to my baby shower when it's like my personal connection with them, because it's building these networks and community that we can support each other. It's just not another Zoom meeting that we're jumping on so we can listen to pretty things that we want to happen. It's taking action together collectively, but also being patient through that, because I've learned that through that 6-month period, it's very important to listen to people, listen to the needs of the community, because there's already like amazing people in the community doing so much, and sometimes they're just not being empowered enough to get out of the regular norms, because it's hard for us. I've had a couple conversations with a couple of you that it's hard for a lot of people that come from communities like ours to take away and a couple of days off to really participate in these meetings, and finding ways that we can support them in that is really powerful, because their voice, their lives, their actions are very important to the contributing factor that we're existing.
We're definitely sharing what it worked, but there are a lot of things that didn't work. A lot of them, and some people, they don't feel comfortable in a digital setting. Like they don't want to use Zoom. They don't want. I mean, people, especially like older folks, that didn't have this connection with technology, it's not something that it's appealing to them. And we actually, for this next phase, we're asking the founder more time. And because we have more time to engage, now that we're going to be
One of the sites.
for one of the sites, because one of the sites, the community is more, they participate more via Zoom, and they were coming. But from one of the sites, we want to bring more folks involved in this like community process. And I just want to share that that's going to create tension among the people that already participate. I have phone calls like, hey, what's up? When is the next meeting? When is this gardening is going to come into life? So right now I'm holding, and I'm really vulnerable right now, I'm holding the tension of like, how am I going to deal with that? How am I going to have these conversations? Because I actually, and this is super honest, I haven't had like a lot of communication for the past 2 months with them. And they're like, hey, what's up? And I'm feeling nervous. I'm feeling like, I don't know, but I'm going to bring the community agreements, remind myself like a lot of grace, being honest about them, about the process. And because this community has also expressed a lot of the times that a lot of folks come, they make a lot of promises, they have community engagement process, and they just leave. So they're tired. They're like, another meeting for another project that I'm not going to see during my lifespan happening. I don't know if I want to put time and effort on that. So it's always like having grace and being really honest about that, and also building stuff that we can build right now, right? Sharing food, recipes, like time together. That's building something. Maybe we're not building the physical garden, but we're planting the seed for the people that are going to care of that place.
Yeah, and something I want to add to that that's really important is in conjunction with what Paula is saying, we didn't know whether the funder was going to fund phase 3. So we were in our own staff going to like Michael and being like, are you prepared to follow up and start looking for other funding if this doesn't come through? Because we're out there making promises, and we don't want to make promises that we're not going to keep. And I think for us, one of the reasons why we were very successful as a team is that the 3 of us have like really strongly aligned values of like prioritizing the community. So we as a team had a really strong sense of shared purpose. And so when we ran into difficulties and hiccups like between ourselves, we were like, okay, we even like pulled out the like, hey, I didn't really feel like you were practicing the community agreements like very well when that happened. And we're like, okay, okay, we gotta do this better. And so I think that translated to our engagement with the community, like the quality of our relationship and the dedication to the purpose transfers over. And it transferred over into how we were relating to our organization to say, if you want us, if we're doing this together, we want to be able to follow through. And so don't put us in a position where we cannot follow through. And we were honest with the community members saying, we don't know if the funder will fund this, but then we were able to say, but if they don't fund it, we will keep working to make this happen, and we will let you know. And so we kind of were having those dialogues when we were hearing the tension and the concerns from the community, adjusting our approach, but also adjusting our workflow so that we were actually following through honestly on the things that were coming up in the meeting. After every single meeting, we debrief at least half an hour and kind of check in about how we thought it would go and like any course corrects that we need for like the next series of meetings. So a lot of time and attention to successfully community engage. But what we have now is 2 beautiful designs. We have a funder who just funded us $250,000 to build these big community engagement hubs that are composting, that are gardens, that are community education, that are spaces for rest and well-being, that are tool lending and book lending libraries, that are programming, that's all the infrastructure, the labor, the community leadership development, all coming to these organizations in a way that they have designed together. And I think one of the most beautiful things that came in the wrap up as we're representing is the community members saying, you can really tell that this is our design. Like if you've been in this meeting, like this is what we said, you know, and this feeling of like, yes, we got it, you know. And so just, it is possible to do this. Like I said in my presentation yesterday, it takes longer. If you want to come in with something that's done and be like, it's done, you may never have the buy-in of that community to really steward that project into the future. And they may always feel like they're doing someone else's project. But when you take this time to build and talk and build understanding and community alongside and follow through, then our hope is we'll see that this will be a project that is really something that people can love and cherish and care for into the future, which allows us to offer that like support in the heavy lift of launching to like other communities later, because eventually hopefully this community will be able to completely steward their own project after it's through this like really heavy lift of resource acquisition and infrastructure development portion.
Thank you. I'm not sure this is this a question or my doubt or something. Do you think like in the meetings, if you have like a bigger crowd, doing the same meeting at 2 or 3 different times in a week or over the period of 2 weeks with only limited number of people who registered for that time slot is going to make us like get more information or make it more comfortable with that particular crowd? Let's say you have 3 people on the meeting for sure, at least 2 actively listening, not like taking notes. They're actively listening, and your meeting crowd is only 10 people that they want to do on that particular time because they have other commitments. So 2 people from your team and there are 10 other people, so you're really engaging with 10 people, and later that day or next day you're doing the same thing with 10 different people. Let's say you have 30 people on the committee and 30 people signed up. So is it going to be more useful to do it like that? Or let's say, okay, we're going to do this meeting from 6 to 7, 30 people jam up, and I don't know, maybe I feel like left alone. I didn't get to say what I want to say completely at the end of the meeting.
This is just an opinion about how I would address that kind of large group, small group dynamic and capacity in terms of your resources. I would try to hold the meeting for all of the people at the same time and do breakout sessions. Send your different staff, if you have 3 staff, to the 3 different breakout rooms, record them, and ask people to come back to the main room for a group harvesting to elevate what they thought was important that happened in their session to the rest of the group. Then in between the meeting, really summarize the different sections, try to integrate it and synthesize it into something concise, and then in the next meeting, represent what happened in all of the spaces to the whole group and invite dissent and feedback on that. So ask, does this really work for you? Does it represent what was said? Is something missing? And then you have a whole group dialogue that gives feedback. So then within 2 meetings, you've really captured the feedback of the larger community in ways that are a small enough group to be personal and share, like in the under 15 number, that's facilitated to pull out. And then when you recognize that a group of people is missing or someone's not contributing that you think is important, you do a follow-up between meeting and you try to weave that in. So for example, in Gonsack Village, we had a lot of participation from the Latino community, but not a lot of participation from the African American community there. And so we went door to door asking people, and we just asked them the same things that we asked. We asked them right there at their door. They answered their door. They were excited to talk about the garden, but they wouldn't come to the meeting. Does that mean that their voice does not get to contribute to the design of the meeting? No. We just sat there and individually wrote down everything they said. Then when we went back to the meeting, we shared all the notes from when we canvassed with all the people who were on the meeting and got their voices into the dialogue of the meeting space, even though they didn't come to the meeting. And we asked the funder, hey, this happened. This is a diverse community, and we're seeing underrepresentation of elders and African Americans, and we don't want to go forward without them feeling really included. So give us a little bit more time to make sure we fully capture their contribution before finalizing the design and getting funding. And they were down for that.
Eleanor said some really great things about funding, and I just want to reiterate them because that's what I do. And it's to talk to funders like they're people, and not to just complain about something or expect them to solve it, right? That's sort of like a paternalistic relationship, but to be like, hey, I know you want to help me. Here's what we're dealing with. Can you do that? Or how could we do that? Or how could we make that work? And so I think it's really key that when you're thinking about stakeholder engagement and community involvement, that your funder is part of your community in this project. Not always. I mean, they might not live there, so it's a different type of community member, but if they're a good funder, they're giving away money because it's from a heart place and you really want to make sure that you acknowledge that with them too. And that'll help you create these kinds of relationships that Eleanor was talking about, where they have a funder who's willing to stick with you for the long run. And it's not just a report and it doesn't really work for you and it's not so fun for them. So I just think that having a funder as a stakeholder is a good way to think about it and treating them like people. The other thing I would say is, in this opportunity, because you have support coming in either in a direct funds to your site or through support from LA Compost or the Inland Empire, funders really like matching opportunities. So you can consider this a match, like a starting match. And then if any of you want to talk to me about fundraising strategies, if we talk with your co-coordinator and me, I'm always happy to talk about that. But leveraging opportunities, helping people feel excited, these are all really great ways to get funders in the door and to stay with you. Thanks, Eleanor.
Hi, everybody. Lo voy a decir en español. Ok. Primeramente quiero dar las gracias y dar el reconocimiento a la organización de este recurso para la comunidad. Gracias, Elinor, y gracias a todo el equipo. Sé que tuvimos una entrevista hace un tiempo con Paola y quiero reconocer el trabajo que están haciendo. Más sin embargo, con la experiencia que he tenido dentro de la organización, nosotros ahorita somos parte de una beca Transformación Climática de Comunidad. Esa beca son $35 millones para la ciudad de Ontario y son precisamente para crear y bajar los dióxidos de carbono. Con el inglés. Sorry.
First of all, Maria wants to just recognize like the people that have been involved in making this opportunity happen for communities on the ground, the people who are here and conducting the interviews, etc. And she's sharing about the involvement in the Transforming Climate Communities project, which is a state-funded grant program currently offering $35 million to the city of Ontario.
Y parte de esos 35 millones de dólares para la ciudad de Ontario, Huerta del Valle es parte de esos socios. Entonces, es gratificante escuchar de todos ustedes que estamos en una misma misión, en un mismo enfoque. Y me gustó esto de cómo lo hizo la ciudad, ¿verdad? Buscar socios y buscar qué van a hacer cada socio. ¿Por qué? Porque había mucho dinero y luego también muchas actividades que se pudieran hacer mejoras en la ciudad. En este caso, con esta beca es encauzada en la composta, en tener esas partes en diferentes comunidades, en diferentes regiones. Y esto para mí es más que crítica, es como algo que pudiera crear, los organizadores pudieran visualizar como los partes de los socios, qué tanto estamos capacitados a crear o que ya estamos creando donde cada uno de nosotros al final o en medio o al inicio, digamos, esto estamos, en medio esto estamos y al final esto estamos y cada uno sea como acreditado para cierta cantidad dependiendo del trabajo que cada uno de nosotros estamos haciendo. Al final del día, para mí, el dinero es un signo de pesos, porque para nosotros, y yo creo que estamos aquí con una misma visión, ¿no? Mejorar el medio ambiente, mejorar nuestra salud. Y eso para nosotros debe de importar bastante más que con cuánto dinero nos vamos a manejar. Para mí eso es lo fundamental, los quiero dejar con ese mensaje. No, tratemos primeramente de hacerlo todo con la pasión que nos trae aquí estar en este día y que nos trae hacer el cambio. Y lo demás, créanme que fluye, de alguna manera u otra, las cosas fluyen. Así de que yo los quiero dejar con ese mensaje y gracias a cada uno por estar aquí. Mucho, ¿verdad?
So at first, Maria was sharing in programs like the Transforming Climate Communities grant opportunity. It's a really beautiful time to see there's a big pot of money, and a lot of organizations and groups can come together to do different parts of it. And that's sort of what's happening with Huerta del Valle. This is not interpreting, just adding. They have like $1 million to do a composting project out of that $35 million. And so what she finds really admirable and good about that is how the city that decided to go after that is to really look at the different groups to collaborate with and kind of pull together those varying missions and groups, kind of an acknowledgement that with these opportunities, not all the groups are going to be in the same place. Some people are going to be starting, some people are in the middle, and some people are at the end. That we need to really kind of like acknowledge and recognize that, and acknowledge the work that that goes into these times of projects. She also was saying, kind of like as a final, like really inspiring message, is like we're really working for all the same things: care for the environment, care for our health in communities, and it's that's really where we need to consistently like have our focus, as opposed to like where the money is coming from or who has how much money. She just wants to offer gratitude to all the people here for like being in this transformational work together, and kind of having those priorities in order.
Y la última. All the time I practice my, regla de oro? Golden rule. Trata como te gustaría que te trataran. Es todo el tiempo, trato como me gusta que me traten. Gracias, siéntate, amo, corazón. O sea, todo el tiempo tratar de trabajar nuestro mejor ser.
So she tries to practice the golden rule, to treat others how you want to be treated, but she also adds like, try to be your best self.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you.